I talked to so many people about moving to Virginia Beach, and I have found a trend of specific things that people make big mistakes about. But there is one mistake that people constantly make that I think creates the biggest regret. So many people wish they had not moved here, and so now I need to make sure and tell people before they move what they need to be aware of. And so what I want to do today is talk about the top 8 mistakes that I see people making before they move to Virginia Beach. And of course, that number one mistake I'll say at the end of the video. My name is Sam Sansalone. I'm a top 1% real estate agent in the Virginia Beach city and area, and I love helping people relocate to the Hampton Roads and Virginia Beach area. This is what I do, and I love it. So as we're going through these mistakes, if you are planning to move or relocate to the Virginia Beach city or the Hampton Roads area in general, let me know. This is what I do. I love helping people relocate here. I like helping people make a plan to move here, helping you strategize the pros and cons to different spots and neighborhoods in the cities. I love doing that. So let me know, and I can help you as early as possible. The earlier the better, actually, for relocating, because there are a lot of things that can come up, and discussing that early can be a big help. So the number 8 mistake that I see people making is they underestimate the jet noise before they move. Problem with moving to Virginia Beach is that there are jets. The Oceana Naval Air Station, especially, and the Fentress Airfield, which is in Chesapeake. The Oceana Naval Air Station is on the eastern side of Virginia Beach. Here's the Oceana Naval Air Station right here. And so people that want to move to Virginia Beach, they often are attracted to the beach, or attracted to the schools, or attracted to the neighborhood, the suburban feel. It's a great living spot. It's a great place to live. But what they don't realize is that the air that you live around makes a difference, and the noise around the jets when they fly it's palpable, to the point to where if you buy a house from another state or country and you look and say, okay, I'm going to be buying and it's within X amount of miles or half a mile or so from the Oceana Naval Air Station, you might think, well, it's probably okay. It's probably far enough away to where it's not a big deal. But it really can be a bigger deal than you realize, even further away from the Oceana Naval Air Station. The problem with the jets is that the noise is so piercing based on not just how far away from the base, but how close the jets are to the ground in some cases. They fly very close in some spots, and based on what time of year that you are in, the jets can fly closer or further away. And so just because you live on one side of the base doesn't mean that you might not hear jets in one season as opposed to another, more or less. And so it's hard to predict. It's hard to measure how loud the jets will be based on where you're going to be living. That's what makes this so hard. So there is what's called the AICUZ, A-I-C-U-Z, the AICUZ Jet Noise Zone Map, which explains and outlines in a color-coded map where the loudest noise is in relation to the Naval Air Station, which can be very helpful. And I do think that this map does show, it's pretty accurate to me in relation to what I've experienced. The issue here is that people's tolerance for the noise is widely different. Some people might be living half a mile or down the street away from the base, and it would be piercing to some people where the windows are rattling, but other people might not even pay attention, which sounds wild, but it can be a scenario where you can tune it out very easily. It depends on the person. So my suggestion, if you're getting stationed here to the Oceana Naval Air Station and you're used to the jets, it's one thing. And there are some neighborhoods close to the base that would be good spots to move or buy a house in close by. But at the same time, if you have never lived in an area that has jets before, it can be a new experience, and enough to where if it was me, I would try and come here at least once during the week, when that's when the most of the jets will fly, and hear what it's like. So if you're maybe targeting a certain type of atmosphere, a certain type of living situation, come early, come a few months beforehand, and then go to that spot in that area that you're looking to move to and see what it sounds like during a day, even a couple of days if possible. That can give you a better perspective on what's realistic. And again, the jets fly different directions based on the time of year. So for example, in the summertime, jets fly from north to south more frequently. Vice versa, if you're in the wintertime, wind current goes often from north to south, jets fly into that. So you'll find that jet noise intensity changes based on the time of year that you might be in. If you're going to be living in the jet noise areas, there are places like Great Neck, places like over closer to the ocean front that you'd find that are often the higher price relative to the rest of the area. You're talking Great Neck is going to be, median sales price might be in the $500,000-$600,000 price range. You'll find houses in the $7 to $1 million. Allenton's a good example of there. Green Hill Farms, anything close to Lincoln Estates or Lake Trent on the other side, Trent, Berkshire, or even the oceanfront Bay Colony, you're talking over $1 million, $2 million on this side. You could be paying a lot for your house, but then realizing you're still close to jets. And that's something that to keep in mind, especially like near Hilltop, all the shopping around Hilltop, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's over there, it'll get you. The air stations right there. So if you want to pivot away from the jet noise areas, you'll start noticing Little Neck is where you'll start seeing or hearing less and less, and it really almost isn't even noticeable to me in the Little Neck area and further away closer to Mount Trashmore, over towards like Larkspur, Bellamy Manor, this whole side in Kempsville, and further west, this whole area, Salem, you don't really hear it too much at all. It really is going over closer to Lynn Haven Parkway near Rosemont is when you start hearing it more frequently. Over going towards Lynn Haven Parkway right here, you'll start hearing it a lot there. So it's funny how you just go a mile or two and it can change a lot, change drastically, and it really comes down to flight patterns. Check that ACU's jet noise zone map to get more information about that. Side note, the Fentress Airfield is down in the Chesapeake area too. There aren't as many houses that are close to here. For example, one neighborhood called Ravenna that's very popular. You do hear some jets over here as well as Albemarle Acres, kind of the eastern side of it, over closer to Centerville Turnpike over here. You will hear some jets there too. So definitely factor this in mind. It's a big mistake people make is not factoring this enough before they make a decision to move. The next mistake I find people make is expecting more of a beach feel before they move as opposed to what is reality in Virginia Beach. The name Virginia Beach, it sounds like you got beach feel, which you do. You've got a lot near the oceanfront. It feels like the oceanfront. It feels like that kind of relaxed, kind of kicking on the beach vibe. You got tourists in the middle of the Virginia Beach oceanfront area, but again, north-south, north end, going down south towards Croatan, towards Shadowlawn over here, Beachboro. There's some neighborhoods down here that it's a beachish community. Same goes in the north side, going towards Cape Story by the Sea, over towards Chicks Beach. Some great beach access over here. But once you leave the coast, even going over towards Ocean View, the same thing. But once you leave the coastline around either the bay or the oceanfront, as you get into Great Neck, or as you get into going further towards the Oceana Naval Air Station, Little Neck, Kempsville, Salem, all these school districts, Kellam, Ocean Lakes down the southeastern corner, it's suburban. You don't really feel the beach atmosphere as you go about 2 or 3 miles away from the beach. I don't know. I mean, I love it, but it's not for everybody, because if you're coming to the Virginia Beach because you have to for a job or for family or for anything that's pulling you here beyond the actual city itself, you might think, well, I want to live closer to the beach. It's fun. I want to be able to walk to the beach, bike to the beach. If you can walk or bike to the beach, you do have that beach dynamic, but as soon as you get in your car and drive away, it feels different. And so if you're planning to move here because you want to be near the beach or want to be, close to that type of relaxed environment, make sure you get as close to the beach as you can, because if you're further away, I don't think it's going to feel that way, especially in downtown Norfolk. Chesapeake feels like it's suburbs. It's one of the most boring cities out there. There's just not much besides just the essentials, but which makes it popular for specific reasons, but not for the beach vibe. The beach vibe is near the coast, and that's about it. And especially even going over towards Hampton, you might see it here. You might feel it over there too. But it's scattered, but other than that, it's popular for other reasons aside from the beach. The next mistake I find people make is that people often buy houses in areas that flood worse than they realize. How do you offset that? Well, one of the things that happens is Norfolk is very well known for flooding, especially on the western side near Larchmont, near Ghent, like a lot of places in there flood. The same goes over closer to the Virginia Beach oceanfront, like closer to right near the boardwalk, but a few blocks away. There's some spots that have some issues there too. And over towards Pungo, which is the southern section where it's all country, got some issues over there closer to the Back Bay Wildlife Refuge where the wind blows the water on shore. It's a lot of marshy areas over there. You often find a lot of places that don't have any issues or many issues at all, but it comes down to definitions of flooding. A lot of the issues here with flooding are roads that flood, cars that get, the water rises enough to where it can affect the insides of the cars, so off-street parking helps. But I don't hear as much as far as neighborhoods or houses getting decimated, but there are some specific spots, namely Windsor Woods over closer to Rosemont. You'll find some spots over here that can be problematic in terms of flooding goes. And then going over closer to Norfolk, it's a pretty notable issue here as far as roadways goes, going down towards The Hague over in this section. I mean, you're going to find yourself driving, if your Google Maps says 15 minutes, give yourself 25, 30 in some cases, because you have to go around certain intersections because the roadways flood. And going over towards Lafayette, over toward closer to the Granby Street near the zoo. This Llewellyn Avenue road here, right close to where this inlet is over near down the Lafayette River. This floods on a regular Tuesday because of the rising floodwaters. They call it king tide, where you'll find some tidal waters will rise pretty high. And so anything close to this side near Colonial Place could be an issue too. So my point here is that I would definitely factor this in. Check your flood zones. See if you're buying a house, if it's in zone AE, B, that's something that you'll require to get flood insurance if you get a mortgage. But those two, X and X500, do not require flood insurance. And so just because you're in a flood zone doesn't mean you're going to have an issue with flooding necessarily. Places that are the driest in the area are still in what they call flood zone X. I would definitely check the flood maps and see where you lie in relation to flood zone X, X500, and then AE, which is the one that requires the most flood insurance. Sometimes you'll find that the lines where FEMA draws flood lines are right close to a house, but they might lie in flood zone X, which means you don't need flood insurance, but the house next door does. And so they can change frequently, and they can change enough to where, just make sure you know not just where the house is sitting, but also where the rest of the area around you is sitting too, so you can determine, okay, is it going to affect my drive time to work, if flooding is an issue. So definitely check that before you make any decisions, especially in Norfolk. If you're planning to move to Norfolk, that is a notable thing. And not as much to me about the house itself, unless it's some specific cases in areas, but otherwise it's, hey, driving around town can be problematic if you're expecting to be somewhere quick. You need to be aware of if it's a hurricane time or nor'easter time. Just a lot of rain over the course of a few days, it can be problematic in roadways. The next mistake I find people make is buying a house near a busy road and that not mattering until they get to the house. And this is a lot of times for people that buy sight unseen or from different states especially, because what you'll find is that Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Chesapeake, and even through Hampton Roads, a lot of the areas were not designed for as many people as are here. So a lot of the main roads, like Indian River Road is a good example of that. Princess Anne Road, Kempsville Road, those are all Virginia Beach roads. But you'll see that those roads, they start out as 2-lane roads. But over time, and like in the 80s and 90s, 2000s, people started building near there or on the roads in some cases. So you find that those roads used to be pretty quiet roads. Well, then now they became more busier, and now neighborhoods were built right close to those roads. So my point here is not necessarily the idea that don't buy on a busy road. Well, obviously, but buying close to a busy road can be as annoying. Just had a conversation with somebody talking about Farrell Parkway, which is, you see, Providence, Kempsville, this is over here, all this Indian River Road right here. Well, Farrell Parkway is right here. Well, this back in the 80s was a lot of nothing. Indian River Road was a long road. It was a 2-lane road. There was a McDonald's close to Lake James, and right at the McDonald's, it should be right there. Right close, that was the edge of the road, and it was all country beyond there in the 80s. Well, there's Farrell Parkway that comes off of Indian River Road. Well, all this was built late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s, late 80s. These are nice neighborhoods. I've done videos about Indian Lakes, which is right here, going further like into Salem Woods over here. Great neighborhood, but the houses that are closest to the roads, you can hear it because this Farrell Parkway is busy. You see here, people are going 45. It's a speed limit, I think, but people go more than that, pretty regularly. And you see houses up along these roads. This is a great example right here of what I'm talking about. Definitely when you see a house on Zillow or see a house on Redfin or wherever, check on the Google Maps, check on a map, Street View, check the aerial view, see where the house is in relation to those major roadways. Just help you make a better decision as to whether you should be moving. And then you're like, hey, well, why is this house not selling? It's in a great spot. Pictures look great. Could be because it's near one of these major roadways. Which leads me to my next mistake people make is that people have an idealistic view of what traffic is in the area, and misinterpreting traffic in the area is really the mistake. But people, they say, okay, I've lived in Chicago, or I've lived in Atlanta, or I've lived in some of these bigger cities. Well, traffic's not a big deal coming to the area based on what you've told me, Sam. It's, if the traffic is 10 or 15 minutes longer, big deal. I'm used to an hour and a half in the car. Which is true. That's a valid point to make because the area in Hampton Roads isn't nearly as intense for traffic as you find in these bigger cities. The problems I find are more of the unpredictability of the traffic. At least in some of these bigger cities, you can prepare for an hour or 2 hours and it's just going to be the way it is. There are times in Norfolk, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, or wherever where you're driving, especially on 64, where you're supposed to be getting from Virginia Beach, for example, and getting to Hampton in 35 minutes or 30 minutes. But then you get traffic on I-64 at the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, or even going over towards Granby Street through 64, which takes it from a 30-35 minute drive to 50-55 minutes or an hour. And then flip it on the other side, going from 64 east on 64, crossing the bridge tunnel that way. Same thing. It could be 35 minutes to get from Hampton over to Norfolk, or it could be an hour and 35 minutes. So the unpredictability of it can be the frustrating part. And it's not just the interstate system. These are busy roads that weren't initially designed for as many cars. Getting better, but still, it's like, you drive down the middle of Virginia Beach and you randomly get some traffic. That can happen more frequently than you might think. Going towards Chesapeake happens also. For example, the Great Bridge right here that goes across the Intercoastal Waterway. The Chesapeake, the Centerville Turnpike Bridge is another one. A couple of drawbridges that can be very frustrating to just live on one side of. Is it a big deal? No. But if you're planning your life around what you think traffic's going to be and then it kind of throws a curveball at you, that's where it can be frustrating. I think people do underestimate the traffic surprises that can come up. The next mistake people make is not liking the neighborhood that you pick as much as you thought you would. So what I find a lot of times is people will buy houses from a different state or a country, and I try really hard to kind of bridge the gap between that initial see a house online, what does it feel like in person? And people I help, I think, really enjoy places that they end up moving to because I try really hard to kind of make sure they understand what the area that they're picking is and what it isn't. A lot of times people pick a spot, they see a house they like, they'll see the pictures online. The pictures, of course, look great because most real estate pictures look amazing online, but they don't always tell the whole story, right? So that often leads to people thinking, oh my gosh, I've got the beach environment. I can drive or walk to the beach, whatever. And they realize, oh goodness, I can't walk to the beach like I thought, or it's going to be a lot more frustrating to get to a place in the Virginia Beach area or Norfolk. It's going to be a lot harder than I realized, or the neighborhood that I'm in just feels like blah, or again, there's a lot of suburbs in Virginia Beach or a lot of suburbs in Norfolk or Chesapeake especially, and so a lot of the areas have nuance, but they feel slightly different, not drastically different. People see a house in a neighborhood that's like, oh, I love all the trees and it feels great and there's a sidewalk, but then they realize this is not what I was hoping for. And maybe it's like 60-70% of what I was hoping for, but man, I kind of feel let down with the whole move. And I just don't like that feeling of people making a decision like that and kind of regretting it. So I'm a big fan of starting early in terms of the planning process. Definitely if you can make a trip first before you make a decision to move. So sometimes the pre-trip isn't possible, sometimes it is, but if you can advance, do that so you can start not just picking spots that you like, but also figuring out based on those spots, like what price range is worth focusing on, because you might find that a house price in the $625 range isn't enough. I may need to bump it to $7. So making those adjustments, but doing it early enough to where you're not rushing at the last minute, because this market is competitive. One thing I do find is that people feel if they make those decisions too late in the game, it can feel like a rushed process. Doing the early stage planning to kind of get the neighborhood stuff settled is important early to make sure you're confident when it's time to make an offer on a house. Which leads me to another mistake people make about houses when they buy them is not understanding the limitations that are around the house that you're buying or the lot or the area that you're buying in. For example, people often, they're moving from a place that is very loose with Airbnb opportunities. People think, well, I'll just buy a house in Chesapeake or Virginia Beach or Norfolk or Hampton, wherever, and then Airbnb it if I need to. Well, short-term rental regulations are very specific in each city. Virginia Beach especially, you only have a couple of different neighborhoods getting over closer to the beach itself, the oceanfront. There are a couple, they call them overlay districts that are close to the Virginia Beach oceanfront, where that's where you can short-term rent. But again, there are some regulations there too, so definitely do your research as far as places you might want to Airbnb yourself. But otherwise, it's almost impossible or not allowed in the rest of the Virginia Beach city. So, people might think, well, I'll just, do a short-term rental. Well, if they live in a place that allows that, they might think that's the way it is everywhere. But it is not like that. I never suggest people to buy a house here with the expectation of being able to short-term rent it anyway. To me, it's an added bonus if possible, but if not, don't do it for that reason. But other things, for example, buying a house on the water. The Army Corps of Engineers is very involved in it. Other entities as well are involved in preserving the shorelines, in how the shorelines are taken care of, bulkheads, how they're repaired, how docks are built, all that stuff. They are very involved. And so if you buy a house that might be on water and you think, well, I can create a better view for myself and just cut some of these trees down, hold your horses. Just be very careful, because most of the times you aren't going to be able to do that. So definitely I would not suggest it. And please don't buy a house that has a lot of trees on it, expect to be able to clear it and just assume that just going to be okay. Be very careful. Also, another thing that people assume that they can do is build an accessory dwelling unit on their property. An ADU, it's called. People in different states, and they say, oh, I converted my garage to an ADU, a one bed, one bath, efficiency, and they rented it out or whatever. But here, the cities are very, very restrictive on what you can do with garages or even building other things on the property. So you can't assume that you can just build an extra dwelling separate from the house. My suggestion is whatever you see on the property, assume that that's all you can do to it. And if there are more opportunities, by all means, it's great, but don't assume that. Definitely do research for the lot you're buying and the house you're buying. The next mistake I see people making is actually a lifestyle thing, which is not realizing how bugs can ruin your life. So mosquitoes and cockroaches. People call them, one example is water bugs. You've got German cockroaches and you have American. American are the ones people here that say are called water bugs, and they're big black bugs, and they look terrifying to a lot of people, and they can fly a lot of times, and so they can just be just pesky and look weird. If you have these American cockroaches running through your house, it's like, well, I got to keep my house cleaner. It's like, well, what am I doing to attract these bugs? The reality is they're pretty much everywhere, and so it's very hard to keep them out of your house, especially after a rain. It's a constant battle. You can get treatments and companies to spray, but just keep in mind that just because you see these things does not mean your house is not clean enough. But it can be an annoyance. But the point is that they can be pesky, they can be around. So those are cockroaches. And then in addition to that, mosquitoes. Mosquitoes, they bite me so much. It was the biggest influence to cause us to get a screen-in porch. I mean, as far as a cost-involved piece of a house purchase, the screen-in porch was to us almost like a gotta have because of the mosquitoes. It's not just living close to water, because it's humid, right? It's a very humid area, and the moisture content is so high, it attracts these mosquitoes. So you could be out in the middle of the city and just get loaded with them. And so if you are a person that gets bitten by them, be prepared beforehand. Again, do all the measures that you're used to taking, but if you want to enjoy light outside, enjoy the trees that you bought the house for, enjoy the open backyard, enjoy even the water views, the mosquitoes can be a killer to all that. And if you're not used to some of these bugs, it can just be just a drag on life. And I've seen that happen to people when they move here, the surprise that they got. And it's not something people talk about enough. That's why I'm trying to make it more of a point to mention it, because it really does affect people. My number one mistake that I think that people make, and it's not as much realized until they get here and you spend time here and you realize this, is that people often feel isolated when they live or move to the Virginia Beach, like the city of Virginia Beach or the areas around it, even in areas that have suburbs. Part of the reason for that is, I think, because this is a very transient area and a lot of military that come in and out. And I think becomes this culture of people that expect to not be here for very long, or they might stay here. You're used to a culture from a different state or different city. They bring that culture in, and it's not that much different necessarily, but it's just different enough to where people aren't necessarily, it's not like a Southern hospitality type of an area where it's like everybody's super nice. People are nice. It's just, how do they express that niceness? Is it like, hey, come on over, whatever? You'll find that in neighborhoods, and that can definitely happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I just think there are a lot more than people realize of areas just feeling like you're isolated, whether it be because you're buying into an area that has people in different demographics, age differences, that you just don't feel like you don't know the people near you as much. So the community feel nearby isn't as much. You feel like you have to drive further than you wanted to get to places that you would want to shop or do things. Now, there are, again, a lot of community environments, HOAs, city civic leagues that do a lot of parties and parades for a lot of different neighborhoods. So there's some great, awesome neighborhoods. If you're trying to move to a different area, you want to make sure you feel connected, and feel like you're part of the community. And if you don't feel that way right away, there are things built into the area like extra drive distances and kind of the subtle culture dynamics here that can, as time goes by, makes it feel harder and harder to connect. I suggest try to be active in trying to connect right away. The neighborhood you pick can matter a lot. Get connected in, like even Facebook groups that are nearby, whether it's meetups or in the schools if you're taking your kids to school. My point here is that try to get assimilated, because the people here are very nice. They don't all behave the same way in terms of how they express that nice. So in the middle of a community, in the middle of a suburb, you might still feel isolated, and that can be, to me, the biggest mistake people make, is to not kind of do enough research in the area that they're targeting and feel comfortable in that area before they make a decision to move. So if you have any other questions about relocating to the Hampton Roads of Virginia Beach City or the Hampton Roads area in general, let me know. It's what I do. I love helping people relocate to Virginia Beach. So if you have any questions, I have my contact information in the description. You can click below to book a call with me. Also, I have a free download for a guide, a buyer's relocation guide also. So if you have any questions, you can refer to that or watch the next video here. It gets in more detail about relocating to the Virginia Beach area, and I'll see you on the next video.